please welcome the comedian, commentator, satirist, and host of the legendary Jimmy Dore show, the one and only Jimmy Dore. Jimmy, welcome to the show. A great pleasure to see you again. Let me ask you, if I may, first about this 21-year-old boy that's been shanghaied by military. Even my children were asking me why he was being arrested by soldiers rather than policemen. If he's guilty, it was never Russian disinformation from the beginning. If he is guilty, what has he done other than what good journalism is supposed to do? Get your hands on inconvenient truths that contradict the lies that our rulers are telling us. And therefore, why isn't he being given a Pulitzer Prize rather than shackles and irons?
So the irony is this was a real mask-off moment for at least the press in the United States, because it was the press that, instead of using and trying to cultivate this a guy as a source, which is what you're supposed to do as a journalist. You're supposed to cultivate sources like that, and then you're supposed to teach them how to protect themselves, and you're supposed to protect them from prosecution because they're the ones getting you the documents that are exposing crimes or lies that the people have a right to know about. And they did the exact opposite. It was the Washington Post who did a story. They went on the Discord that this young man, I guess, apparently leaked this stuff on, and they did the investigation for the FBI, found out who he was, and then told everybody. And the same thing with the New York Times. And it was like, this is the opposite. If you were a journalist, this would be the opposite of how you would act. And so they realized that what I think, if you're looking, but of course people aren't, but if you are looking, you would see that it was a real mask-off moment for the press in the West, in the United States for sure. They went to the Pentagon and they had a press briefing with the Pentagon, and they were all there upset that the Pentagon let this leak. Instead of talking about the lies that it revealed that the government had told, the fact that we're actually now in a hot war with a nuclear power, they didn't talk. They were upset, and they wanted to know how they're going to crack down on this guy, how they're going to crack down on future leakers, how they're going to secure these kind of documents. Those were their questions. Their questions weren't about. So it never smelled right from the beginning. Why would a 21-year-old National Guard, like that's like not even in the active, I don't know how, if in the United States, the National Guard is like, you're not even full-time. They're not full-time in the military. So why would someone like this get access to something that is supposed to be so embarrassing? Why is that, right? I don't know. There's speculations, but it all doesn't smell right. And you're exactly right also that what did, remember Vitamin, what was his name? Vitamin? He was the one who released those documents to try to get Trump in trouble. Everybody praised him. Hey, how about the person who leaked the documents on the Supreme Court about their upcoming abortion ruling? Nobody even tried to find out who that is. Nobody's upset at that person. It's really funny how the American press and the American establishment, how sometimes they really like leakers and sometimes they hate them. And this is one of those cases where they're supposed to not like this guy. First of all, the questions that should be asked right now is about the government lying, about being in a hot war with a nuclear power. The second thing it should be, why would someone in this kid's position have access to stuff that's supposedly this embarrassing and sensitive? This is on you. It seems like maybe what are you, setting something like this up to happen? For sure. Why would you be doing that? So those are the questions I would be asking if I had access to the people who had to give me an answer for it. But those are not the questions that the American press have. So it's just transparent. What Chomsky said, 25, 30 years ago, that the press is there not to tell you the truth about the news, but to manufacture consent for the establishment's narrative. And that's exactly what has happened. And As I say, and I think I've said here before, the American people don't know what's going on in Ukraine. They have no idea what's going on in Ukraine. But what's worse is that they have no idea that they have no idea what's going on. They think they know. That's the bad thing. They think Putin woke up one day and decided to invade Ukraine, and he's a big bad bully. No, but they don't even know about the coup instigated. They don't know anything about the Azov battalion and the stuff they do. They know it's been diminished. They have no sense of the history of the expansion of NATO, that we're the aggressors. They have no sense of how many actual military bases the United States has around the world. And I got to tell you, George, that the United States we're in a death rattle of our economy right now and our empire, right? Because we have people living under every bridge in every major city. They won't even give money to the cities to fix the bridges those people are living under, but they can send $110 billion to the most corrupt country in Europe at the snap of a finger with no debate, because everybody agrees, because they all work for the same handful of billionaires, for the military industrial complex and Wall Street, which are, again, they work with each other and they have the same agenda. And so this is the problem in the United States, and they're all going along with it. Everyone in the progressive Democratic Party voted for the Ukraine war funding. And they do it as if it's their Christian duty to fight evil, instead of what it actually is, another economic proxy war that's going to put an awful hurt on the people of Ukraine, which they're being used as cannon fodder for an economic war by the West, by actually the United States, because everybody in Europe, from what I can tell, I mean, I'm a guy on YouTube in my garage, but it seems like everybody's hurting because of this, except the United States, which gets to sell more liquefied natural gas at, I guess, a higher price. And so it seems, it's like, but don't you, but maybe I'm talking too much, but it does. The good news is it seems like, with the efforts of China and Russia to actually bring peace to Saudi Arabia and Iran and bring peace between Syria, they're the peacemakers. They're the investors in the United States. If you spin the globe, it's just filled with military bases. They admit to having like 850 or something like that. It's probably over 1,000 because lots of them are secret, right? But no other country does anything like this. And George, this is exactly how empires end. And we're ending exactly like they all do. We're overextending militarily, and we won't even give our own people health care. We're raising the security. Hey, here's a funny thing. In France, they're setting the whole country on fire. There's millions and millions of people in the streets because they're raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. In the United States, they already raised it to 67. And because the media is so bought, nobody even knows it. And you know what they're protesting in the United States? Bud Light, because of the trans issue. It's the craziest thing. They have people completely distracted in the United States, which is why I don't think that the United States will ever change until our empire is over, because the petrodollar is going away because of all this shenanigans. And the ironic thing, George, is this is exactly what they said Trump was going to create, this kind of world situation for the United States, where they were all, even our friends are turning their back on us now, like France. And Macron he doesn't want to be bootlicking anymore. And it seems like there's going to be a movement in Europe like that. And now there's new power centers coming together to oppose the hegemony of the United States and our economic power. We got BRICS happening, right? So all that stuff, the South America is thinking going on their own currency. These are, and you know what, we should be trying to. The only response that the West has is war.
Yeah, they can knock you down. They can't build you up. China builds airports, roads, bridges, ports, harbors. China builds you up, but the United States can knock you down. They still have the power to do that. But it is increasingly inchoate, as you said. I like the point that you made about empire and the Bud Light thing. The Roman Empire ended not just because it overextended, not just because it debased its own currency, but because its society itself became debased. The last days of the Roman Empire were actually rather comparable to the last days of ours. I'm going to say ours because we are two countries divided by a common language, but as events in Ireland showed, just the other day. We have effectively become one country, and we don't even have a leader. He was pushed aside by your leader, physically, literally pushed aside, so that Joe Biden could salute a guy who turned out to be the airport commissioner, who was wearing a fancy uniform and had no other importance whatsoever. But before I get to him, as you described the world turned upside down, I was thinking about the role that Trump is now playing. It's turned so upside down that all the liberals and leftists and progressives are the war party, and Donald Trump, who we were told was going to set the world on fire, he's the leader of the anti-war movement. Explain.
So, yeah, that's exactly what a big reason why they wanted to get rid of Donald Trump, right? Because he wasn't as big a warmongers as they were. And, the thing they impeached him for was delaying shipments of arms to Ukraine. I mean, so I try to tell people that we have to get, people think that like, oh, Bernie Sanders or AOC or people in the squad or the Justice Democrat, that they're in there fighting for you. That only keeps people invested in this system and not doing things that are actually going to bring change, right? The only thing that's going to bring change now in the United States is for people to give up hope in this system and try to somehow overthrow it in a radical way, like the way the truckers did it in Canada. That was really effective, and it brought them to their knees. It brought out the fascists, right? So at the end stage of capitalism, it becomes fascism. And that's where we are. That's what they did. They did that for capitalism. They didn't do that to protect themselves from a foreign enemy. They did that to protect capitalism from these guys who were trying to assert their liberty, right, and their freedom, and protest against authoritarianism. So that's all they have left now. And now we're going to digital currencies, and they keep letting the truth slip out left and right. Every other day it seems like there's an interview with another central banker admitting that they want to have the control of people's money, and that's what this digital currency is about. The banks want this. And that's what they did. So if you try to stand up against it, they call you a terrorist, and then they now control your bank account, and they can stop. Now you can't go travel. Now you can't go eat. You can't go pay and your rent, your bills. You can't go to work. You can't do anything. They can make you a non-person, right? So we're living in the dystopian future that those science fiction writers have warned us about. It's here, and people don't realize it because we're the frog in the pot. It's happened slowly. It all started with the 9/11 in the United States, when they started taking away all our rights. And then Barack Obama got rid of habeas corpus, which, is a right to a speedy trial. So now they can just put you in jail without a trial, and all they have to do is say you're a terrorist. They repealed habeas corpus, which was in the Magna Carta. So now the United States is operating on a liberty view from somewhere around the 1100s. That's how bad, because this is all about capitalism. And this is all about military industrial complex and Wall Street getting control of a government. And this is what happens, and this is the result of it. And we're going down. As soon as the petrodollar, so now, Saudi Arabia, as well as I, they're starting to sell oil in other denominations than the United States dollar. So that marks the beginning of the end for sure, of our dominance in our dollar. And once that goes, it's going to be really bad for the United States. But the people running the country don't care. Right? We don't actually have people running the country. The people running the country are a handful of billionaires that run everything. There's only 6 media companies in the entire country of the United States, 6. So every newspaper, every magazine, every radio show, every TV show, every movie gets produced by one of 6 companies. And everybody works for the same people. And that's why the press is so bad. And that's why the people in the United States are so uninformed, which is why things will never change, because they don't know they're propagandized. And pardon me for repeating myself. I'm sure I said it the last time I was here. But people in the United States think that propaganda is something that happens to people in other countries. And that is not the people, when it's happening to them in other countries, they know it. right? So when people lived in Soviet Union, they knew the news wasn't the news. They knew it was propaganda coming from the government, and they had to read between the lines. But when people turn on Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity or Anderson Cooper, they have no idea they're repeating CIA talking points that come from capitalists and imperialists. They think they're getting the news from people who are critical of the government. And so that's why
Yeah.
they have no idea that they're that propagandized, and that's what leads us to here, and that's why we can have a demented guy like Joe Biden, which every turn it's I mean, they said that Trump was supposed to embarrass the United States. What does that do? And that $100 billion that they gave to Ukraine, you think they could have put a couple of dollars in there to buy a dog to lead Joe Biden off stage when he's done giving a speech, right?
Now, finally, with a bit of good news, I saw some stats the other day that show that the aforementioned Rachel Maddow has slumped to a tiny audience share in the United States. She was up there during the Russiagate and all the rest, but she has slumped way below and even me in terms of audience. More than 1.2 million people watched the mother of all talk shows in the last 7 days. You've got 1 million subscribers on YouTube, more after this interview. You've got 100,000 subscribers on Rumble. People like you and Joe Rogan completely dwarf the audiences of these so-called mainstream media commentators. So the masses are switching them off, and a significant number are switching on to alternative points of view. That's got to be good news.
That is good news, and thank God for places like Rumble, because Google, which owns YouTube, they are the military-industrial complex. They are the CIA and the FBI. So if there was this thing called YouTube files, that they would reveal the same thing, just like the Twitter files revealed about Twitter. There would be the same thing happening at YouTube. So all they have right is right now, because the people are starting to see through. In fact, that was what Bernie Sanders kind of opened people's eyes to in the United States. A big percentage of was that both parties were bought. And then as soon as Donald Trump became president, Bernie stopped telling that truth. And people need to be reminded of it. And so that's the thing they fear, is that people on the left and the right realize that we're being screwed over by a common enemy, and that is the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, health insurance. We still don't have health care in the United States. We sent $100 billion to the Ukraine. Right in their faces, they're doing it now. This corruption is right in their faces. And the reason why it seems like we're never going to get health care in America, and we're going to keep funding war over and over. It's a sad state of affairs. And you're right, though. If people do wake up, people are waking up to media like this, and I really do encourage people to go to Rumble, because there's big censorship on YouTube, and there's lots of things you can't say that you need to say. And what do they censor the most? They censor the COVID narrative, the vaccines, and they also censor war. So, they don't let you tell. I mean, they were taking people down for telling the truth about Ukraine war a lot. And I had to tiptoe around it and tell the truths in ways that people, with a wink. And if people realize that the left and the right have a common enemy, and that the billionaire-owned media is making us blame each other for the pain that's been inflicted by the billionaire class, then it's all over for them, right? And so that's the message of my show, and I think people are waking up to that. And my neighbor isn't my enemy. My enemy is the establishment and the oligarchy. And they said on January 6th, your democracy, they were trying to steal your democracy. Hey, I got news for you. They stole our democracy decades ago. The corporations bought our government, which is why workers haven't had a raise since 1980.
Wow. Jimmy Dore, as always, a great pleasure to see you here on the mother of all talk shows. More power to your microphone, the legendary Jimmy Dore. I'll be right back after a very short break. 60 seconds. Count them.